The next thing we want to talk about is aggregation. And aggregation means when you have some object referring to another object. So for example, if I have a student and I want to store information about that student, I'm storing their name and their address. Now, before, when we store address, we used to just store it as a string. But instead of storing it as a string, maybe I want to store it as another object. So I have an address object that might have the house number, the zip code, the city, the state, and then I have a student object that saves a reference to the address object. This is called aggregation, when an object is storing a reference to another object. So if we were to go back and look at the bank account that we wrote last class, maybe instead of having a name for the person, maybe I want to store an actual entity, an actual object. So maybe I will create a project called, let's say, account holder. And inside the account holder, I will store some information that they usually require you to give when you open an account. So maybe I will store the person's name, the person's social security number, and the person's address. Okay. So let's say this is the account holder. This is the information. Let's create a quick constructor. That one is the empty constructor, and let's create another constructor that takes everything. String name, string social security number, and string address, and let's save these three pieces of information. Name is N, social security is S, and address is A. Now that we've learned that we should be writing, we should also be writing other constructors like the copy constructor. Account holder, so this is how we write the copy constructor. We take another object and we just copy the information that we want from it. And we'll write the others in a second also, the other methods that we learned. But basically, I just created an account holder class, and now in my bank account, instead of storing a reference to the name, I want to store the account holder. Okay. Do I have a typo? Looks like I have a typo. Account holder. Okay, I can't, it has two C's. Oh. Oh, I made a mistake. I created a project. Sorry, we're not supposed to be creating a project. I was supposed to be creating a file. So let's back off. Instead of creating this project, I should be creating a file in here. So instead of project, I should have created a file. And let's call it, oops, we don't want it in the review. We want it in the bank account. So let's click on bank account and click on add file. And so here I want to add a Java class, a new class, and we'll call it account holder. And you see sometimes when you create a new file, it goes into a default package. You want to hold it down and drag it and put it into the same folder as the other file so that they're both in the same folder. So we want them in the same folder in NetBeans. So now they are in the same folder. And let me just copy this code that we wrote over there. There we go. So I don't need this project anymore. Let's just delete it to clean up. Okay. So basically we want the two files to be in the same folder. Now, what doesn't it like now? Cannot find symbol account holder. Now, there we go. Now it has it. Okay. So we have now a reference to another object. So account holder is an object that is storing some information on my bank account is storing a reference to that. Of course, it's going to also be null at the beginning if it hasn't been initialized. And like I said, this is called aggregation. Now, of course, we have to refactor our code. So let's go back and refactor something. So if I want to get the name of the person, the name is not stored here. I have to go to holder, to the owner, and get the name from there. And we don't have a method, so let's assume that we're going to add a method, get name. So let's go to account holder and let's add a get name method. Get name, return name. Okay. So now we have the get name. The set name also, we can't just do it directly here. We have to go through the account holder. So the first thing is when you're dealing with an object that stores information, you shouldn't be getting access to the information stored, the instance field. You also have to still go through methods. So if I want to set the object, the name of the owner, I have to go and call a method. So I have to go to the owner and say set the name and set it to the name. So now I need to make sure I go to my account holder and add a set name method. And this is true of everything. So you shouldn't be making, one of the mistakes that people make is come here and make these public so that they can access them from the bank account. This is wrong. These instance fields should remain private. And the only way you should be able to access them is through methods. Okay, let's go continue going down and seeing what else I need to fix. So here also I need to say owner dot set name defined. Now before I do this, what do you think I need to do? So if I run this code is going to crash. And I'll show you in a little bit that it's going to crash. And I want you, while I'm fixing up the code, I want you to think, why will it crash? Okay. Fixing our copy constructor. That we're always going through methods on the aggregate object that we're storing. And let's repeat that here. We need to also fix the toString and the equals. Let's fix the toString first. So now at least we fixed the code to compile. It's not fully fixed. We'll fix more about in it. But let's run this code and see what happens in main when we try to create a bank account. And we get a null pointer exception. Null pointer exception means you have something that is null and you tried accessing it. Where did it come from? So on line 88, we tried creating the bank account with horse and 50. That took us to line 73. And when we tried to set the name on the owner object, we got a null pointer exception. This is because here we are storing an account holder object, but we never actually created the object. We never said equal to new account holder. So what we should be doing in the constructor before we set the name is actually be creating a new account holder object. So account holder, oops. So we need to go to the owner that we are storing a reference to and say, this is going to be a new account holder. And if you don't do that, your owner object remains null and you cannot access it. Okay, so this is needed in all the constructors. Now what I'm going to do, I'm not going to put it in these, actually let's put it in, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to comment it out because I want to show you something else that will also break. So right now I just fixed it in, actually I need to fix it here. Let's fix it here because this is the one that's being called right now. This one. This is the one that's being called. I'll comment it out from the other ones because I want to have the code break again so I can show you another problem that we're having. Okay, so now if I run this code, now, oops, now I got another null pointer exception. Oh, because I used the one that has a. Okay, so I actually do need to do it in this one too. So let's just fix it there too. Okay, actually let's just fix it in all. I'll show you the other problem later. So the first thing is when you have an aggregate object that you're storing a reference to, you need to remember in your constructor to create the object. So you have to create it using the word new. So that's the first thing that I want to show you. The other thing that I wanted to show you was that you need to make sure that when you have an object, you go through the object. So here, when I am going to the toString method, let's look at our toString method. Here I'm assuming that bank account knows everything about account holder. So if I want to print everything about account holder, what I really need to do is also go and print, for example, their social security number and go to the owner and say, get me the social security number, even though I don't have that method, but I should do that. Okay, now let's just add the get social security number, public string get SSN. Now, what we see is going to happen is that every time account holder adds a new piece of information, so now they have name, social security number, address, so that means bank account needs to be aware of the content of account holder, name, social security number, address. If they add another field like phone number, then that means bank account needs to be updated to add a get phone number. That doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense that bank account should also be responsible for taking care of account holder. You know, in real life, when you're working in an engineering environment in a company, usually every person is responsible for a set of classes. So you might be working on bank account and someone else is working on account holder. And you don't want it to be the case that every time account holder updates themselves, you have to go and update yourself too. This is not the right way to do it. So what should the toString method do in bank account to do the right thing? Well, the right thing to do is for it to say, okay, I have an owner that's a bank account. I'm going to go to the owner and I'm going to say, I want you to print yourself. Everyone should be responsible for printing their own selves. So all I have to do in bank account is go to owner and say, owner, print yourself. Account holder, print yourself. And now I am leaving it to the account holder to print itself. So account holder should be responsible for printing the information needed. Okay. Maybe, you know, social security number is a private information that should not be showing up. So account holder will decide that I will not be printing the social security number. So you're leaving that the control of what we should be doing with account holder to the person or the developer that wrote account holder. We are not doing it in a bank account. We don't decide. So we want to kind of leave everything for the class to implement itself. So if you want to print an object that you are referring to, you need to refer that to the object. Implement the toString method in that object and just call it. The same way with the equals method. If I want to check if two bank accounts are equal, I need to go to the owner and say, owner, are you equal to the other dot owner? Okay. And maybe I'll also add the amount here. So add amount equal to other dot amount. Okay. So now, also in the equals method, I am referring to the account holder to decide how two people or two account holders should be the same. So I'm going to go to my account holder now, and I need to add an equals method there too. Here we'll say if name is equal to other dot name. Let's make it equals ignore case. So if they have the same name and they have the same social security number, case, then I will consider that equal, and I won't check the address because someone might have more than one address. So I'm just concerned with their name and social security number. And so the main idea that I want you to get out of this is that every time you are storing a reference to an object, you need to make sure that you refer everything that we've learned to that object. The equals method should be referred to that object. The toString method should be referred to that object. The copying, so in the copy constructor, right now, what we did, let's go to the copy constructor. What we did was we created a new account holder and we set the name. And then we would have to set the social security number and set the address. That is wrong. This is not the right way to do it. You should just go and say, hey, I have an owner here, an account holder. I want you to create a copy of it. And so now I leave it to account holder to do the copy itself. So every time you have an aggregate relationship between two classes, make sure that anytime you want to access information in that class, you access it through methods, like we did here, and you also access like the equals, the toString, the copy constructor, all that information that we've learned in the last class, you also get to it through the methods that are defined on your aggregate object that you are storing a reference to. Okay, so this is the first thing that I want you to know about aggregation. And in the next video, we'll learn a little bit more about aggregation.